The hearing room fell silent. Every camera lens zoomed tight on the witness table, where Karoline Leavitt sat with her hands folded, her expression perfectly composed. She had done this 100 times before. Congressional hearings were theater, and she knew her lines. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett adjusted her microphone. The Texas Democrat had a reputation for direct questions and sharper follow-ups. Today, something different flickered in her eyes. Something that made the press gallery lean forward in their seats. "Miss Leavitt, thank you for appearing before this committee today," Crockett began, her voice steady. "I want to discuss your communications with private sector individuals regarding official White House policy." Leavitt nodded once. "Happy to clarify any questions the committee may have." "Good." Crockett reached for a manila folder. "Let's start with something simple. How often do you communicate with Elon Musk?" The question hung in the air. Leavitt's attorney shifted beside her. "I've had occasional professional interactions with Mr. Musk, as have many in the administration." Leavitt responded. "He's a significant figure in American industry." "Occasional." Crockett repeated the word slowly. "Would you say once a month? Once a week?" "I don't keep precise records of every conversation, Congresswoman." "That's interesting." Crockett pulled a single sheet from the folder. "Because I do." The room temperature seemed to drop 3 degrees. Leavitt's composure held, but her eyes tracked the paper in Crockett's hand like a hawk watching movement in tall grass. Behind her, the administration's legal team exchanged glances. "Miss Leavitt, are you aware that communications involving government officials and private citizens regarding policy matters can become part of the public record under certain circumstances?" "I'm aware of standard protocols, yes." "Then you won't be surprised by what I'm about to read." Crockett lifted the paper. "On March 14th of this year, at 11:47 p.m., you sent a text message. Would you like me to read it aloud?" Leavitt's attorney stood immediately. "Congresswoman, if you're introducing evidence that wasn't provided to us in advance..." "Sit down, counselor." The committee chairman interrupted. "The witness will answer." Leavitt swallowed once. It was the first crack in her facade, and every reporter in the room caught it. "I'd like to know the source of whatever document you're holding," Leavitt said carefully. "Before we proceed." Crockett smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "The source is going to be the least of your concerns, Miss Leavitt. Because this text message isn't about pleasantries. It's about something much more serious." She began to read, quote, "The reporter from the Post is asking questions about the Starlink contracts. We need to coordinate our response before morning. Can't have them digging deeper. Call me." Crockett looked up. End quote. "Miss Leavitt, did you send that message?" The silence stretched for 4 full seconds. In congressional hearing time, that was an eternity. "I don't recall that specific message," Leavitt finally said. "You don't recall telling Elon Musk, a private citizen with billions of dollars in government contracts, that you needed to coordinate your response to press inquiries." "I'm saying I don't recall the specific message. If there was communication, it would have been appropriate coordination between..." "Appropriate." Crockett cut her off. "Let me read another one. March 17th, 2:15 a.m. Quote, "They're going to subpoena the internal memos. E says he can delay through his legal team. Need 3 weeks minimum to get everyone aligned." A murmur rippled through the gallery. The chairman banged his gavel once. Leavitt's face had gone slightly pale. She turned to whisper something to her attorney, but Crockett wasn't finished. "Would you like me to continue, Miss Leavitt? Because I have 37 more messages spanning a 4-month period, and they paint a very specific picture." "I object to this entire line of questioning," the attorney said, standing again. "The source of these documents has not been established. Their authenticity has not been verified." "We can verify them right now," Crockett interrupted. "Miss Leavitt, do you still have the phone you used to send these messages?" Every camera in the room zoomed tighter. "I have my current phone," Leavitt said slowly. "Is it the same phone you used in March?" A pause. "No." "What happened to that phone?" "I upgraded devices. Standard protocol." "What happened to the old device?" "It was wiped and recycled according to administration procedures." Crockett nodded slowly. "Convenient timing. The phone was wiped in April, correct? Just 3 weeks before this committee announced its investigation." "That's coincidental, is it?" Crockett pulled another sheet. "Because I have records showing the device wipe request was submitted on April 3rd. Our investigation was announced publicly on April 21st. But the internal memo authorizing this committee's inquiry was dated March." She let that sink in. "Ms. Leavitt, did you have advance knowledge of this investigation?" "This is absolutely ridiculous." Leavitt's voice cracked with anger for the first time. "You're sitting there making accusations based on documents that could have been fabricated by anyone. This is a politically motivated witch hunt, and everyone watching knows it. A witch hunt, Crockett repeated calmly. That's your defense? My defense is that I've served this administration with integrity and dedication. I've done nothing wrong. These so-called texts could have been manufactured by any hostile actor, any foreign government, any political operative, looking to damage this White House. Crockett leaned back. So you're denying you sent these messages? I'm saying I don't recognize them and I question their authenticity. Fair enough. Crockett turned to her aide and nodded. A moment later, a laptop screen flickered to life on the large monitor behind the witness table. Leavitt's head snapped around. What we're about to show, Crockett announced, is metadata analysis conducted by the committee's technical consultants. What you'll see is the original message data, including timestamp verification, device identification and carrier routing information. The screen filled with technical data, phone numbers, timestamps, IP addresses, a web of connections linking multiple devices and accounts. The highlighted number, Crockett continued, is registered to you personally, Miss Leavitt. Not a government phone. Your personal device. Leavitt stood up so fast her chair scraped backwards. This is outrageous. You're displaying my private information on national television. This is an invasion of privacy. It's illegal. It's evidence, Miss Leavitt. Evidence obtained through legal channels. And if you'd like to challenge its admissibility, you're welcome to do so through proper procedures. But right now, in this hearing, you're going to answer my questions. The chairman leaned forward. The witness will sit down. Leavitt remained standing for a long moment, her face flushed with anger, her fists clenched at her sides. The cameras captured everything, the trembling hands, the rapid breathing, the barely contained fury. Slowly, she sat. Now, Crockett said, her voice never rising above conversational level, let's talk about what he says he can delay through his legal team actually means. The hearing had been running for 90 minutes. Outside, crowds had gathered around the television screens in the Capitol halls. Social media was exploding. Every major network had cut away from regular programming. Inside the room, Leavitt looked like she'd aged 5 years. Ms. Leavitt, I want to be very clear about what we're discussing, Crockett said. These messages don't just show coordination, they show obstruction. That's your interpretation. Let me read another one. April 1st, 9:23 p.m. Quote, the WSJ is running something tomorrow. E's people already contacted their legal. Should die before it publishes. You owe me dinner. A collective gasp from the gallery. You owe me dinner, Crockett repeated. That's how you discuss killing a news story about government contracts worth billions of dollars? Like you're discussing a favor between friends. That message is being taken completely out of context. Then provide context. I'm asking you directly, what was the WSJ story about, and why did Elon Musk's legal team contact a newspaper to stop it? Leavitt's attorney jumped in. My client cannot speak to the actions of private citizens or their legal representatives. Your client was apparently coordinating those actions. She can certainly explain her own involvement. I had no involvement in any suppression of journalism, Leavitt said firmly. I simply passed along information about upcoming coverage. That's standard media relations. Standard media relations includes telling a private citizen to kill a story through legal intimidation. I never said that. Crockett lifted another page. March 29th. Quote, he says if they run the piece, he'll pull all advertising from the parent company. Billions in revenue. They'll fold. The room erupted. The chairman banged his gavel repeatedly. Order! Order! Leavitt's face was now a mask of controlled panic. Her eyes darted to the exits, to her legal team, back to Crockett's implacable face. That message, she started. Yes, that message was discussing hypothetical scenarios. It wasn't a statement of intent. Hypothetical. Crockett's voice dripped with skepticism. You and the world's richest man were hypothetically discussing how to use his financial leverage to suppress journalism about his government contracts. For fun, as a thought experiment, you're twisting everything. I'm reading your words, Miss Leavitt. Your exact words. The committee took a 15-minute recess. Leavitt huddled with her legal team in a side room. Through the glass, reporters could see animated gestures, raised voices, shaking heads. When they returned, something had changed. Leavitt's posture was different. Stiffer, more defensive. Her attorney had a stack of papers that hadn't been there before. Crockett noticed immediately. Welcome back, Miss Leavitt. Before we broke, we were discussing coordination between yourself and Mr. Musk regarding media coverage. I'd like to move to something more serious. More serious than what you've already alleged. Much more serious. Crockett pulled out a thick document. This is the Starlink Emergency Services contract, signed in February, valued at $4.2 billion over 5 years. Are you familiar with it? I'm aware of the contract, yes. Were you involved in the negotiation or approval process? In a communications capacity, I helped prepare public statements. Just public statements? That's correct. Crockett nodded slowly. Then why on February 3rd did you text Elon Musk the following? Contract approved internally. Announcement Thursday. Congratulations, we did it. The blood drained from Leavitt's face. We did it, Crockett repeated. Not they did it. Not the contract was approved. We did it. As if you personally accomplished something together. That was what, Miss Leavitt? Enthusiasm? Friendly congratulations to a business associate? Or evidence that you were actively involved in steering a $4.2 billion contract to a personal contact? I had no authority over contract approvals. That's handled by the Office of Management and Budget. Yes. Headed at the time by someone you text regularly, according to these records. Someone who received a message from you on January 28 saying Crockett checked her notes. Johnson's on board. We're green lit. The attorney's hand went to Leavitt's arm. A clear signal to stop talking. But she was already halfway through her response. There's nothing improper about keeping stakeholders informed of process developments. Stakeholders? Crockett's voice finally rose. Elon Musk is not a stakeholder in the government approval process. He's a bidder. A contractor seeking approval. And you were feeding him inside information at every step. That's not— Did you receive any compensation for this assistance, Miss Leavitt? The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Absolutely not. No payments? No gifts? No promises of future employment? Nothing. Crockett reached for one final document. Then how do you explain this message from March 8? Board seat will be waiting when this is over. E's exact words. 3 years and we're golden. The room exploded. Leavitt was on her feet again. This time pointing directly at Crockett. You have no right. These are private communications. This is entrapment. It's surveillance. It's everything this administration has warned about, the weaponization of government against political opponents. Miss Leavitt, please sit down. No. I will not sit down while my private life is paraded in front of cameras to score political points. This is exactly what we've been fighting against. What you've been fighting against, Crockett said calmly, appears to be transparency and accountability. These messages show a pattern of corruption that extends to the highest levels of this administration. You don't know what you're talking about. I know that you texted about a promised board seat with a man who received billions in government contracts. I know you coordinated responses to press inquiries to hide the nature of your relationship. I know you discussed using financial leverage to suppress journalism. All lies. Are they? Crockett stood now, matching Leavitt's energy. Then explain the board seat comment. Explain we did it. Explain everything you've said in these messages. Leavitt's mouth opened, but no words came out. You can't explain them, Crockett continued, because there is no innocent explanation. You were trading government favors for personal advancement. You were coordinating with the richest man in the world to manipulate media coverage and steer billions in taxpayer money to his companies. And you did it all through private text messages, thinking no one would ever see them. Leavitt turned to her attorney. Get me out of here. Now. Miss Leavitt, this hearing is not adjourned. I don't care. I'm invoking my Fifth Amendment rights. I refuse to answer any more questions. The declaration sent shockwaves through the room. The Fifth Amendment meant she believed her answers could incriminate her. It was an admission without being an admission. Crockett sat back down, satisfied. The witness has invoked her Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination. Let the record reflect that after being confronted with text messages showing coordination with Elon Musk regarding government contracts, media suppression, and promises of future compensation, Ms. Karoline Leavitt has declined to provide further testimony. This isn't over, Leavitt said, her voice shaking. This is just the beginning. You have no idea what's coming for you. I'll take my chances, Crockett replied. You should worry about what's coming for you. Within hours the clips were everywhere. Every news channel ran the footage on loop. We did it became a trending hashtag. Legal analysts debated potential charges. Political commentators dissected every facial expression, every moment of the confrontation. Leavitt's office released a statement calling the hearing a partisan ambush based on illegally obtained materials. The statement promised legal action against anyone who distributed the messages and demanded an investigation into how they were acquired. Crockett held a press conference outside the Capitol. What we witnessed today, she told reporters, is just the beginning. These text messages raise serious questions about the relationship between this administration and private interests. Questions about corruption. Questions about obstruction. Questions that demand answers. Congresswoman, where did these messages come from? Crockett smiled slightly. The committee received them through appropriate channels. I can't discuss specifics of an ongoing investigation. Do you believe Ms. Leavitt committed crimes? I believe the evidence speaks for itself. A federal employee coordinating with a government contractor to steer billions in contracts, discussing promised compensation, working to suppress journalism. These aren't policy disagreements. These are potential violations of federal law. What happens next? We've referred our findings to the Department of Justice. They'll make their own determination about criminal liability. But from a congressional oversight perspective, our work continues. Elon Musk broke his silence on social media 3 hours after the hearing ended. His post was characteristically brief. Fake news gonna fake. These people will stop at nothing. Truth always wins. Within minutes, thousands of replies flooded in. Some supportive, many skeptical. Screenshots of the text messages spread across every platform. People began matching the timestamps to public events, finding correlations that supported Crockett's narrative. The Wall Street Journal confirmed that their legal department had received threatening communication in late March, around the time referenced in the messages. They declined to name the source of the threats, but acknowledged that a story about Starlink contracts had been delayed for further review. Former government officials who had worked on the contract began receiving calls from investigators. 3 requested attorneys. 1 reached out to the committee offering to testify. Meanwhile, inside the White House, an emergency meeting convened. According to sources who later spoke to reporters, the atmosphere was tense. Leavitt's fate hung in the balance. Some argued she should resign immediately to contain the damage. Others insisted that backing down would appear as an admission of guilt. The decision came at midnight. Leavitt would take a leave of absence to focus on her legal defense. The official statement emphasized that she had done nothing wrong and would be vindicated. Nobody believed it. 3 weeks later, the Justice Department announced a formal investigation. Subpoenas went out to communications providers, to Musk's companies, to the Office of Management and Budget. The scope was broader than anyone had anticipated. Crockett appeared on Sunday morning news programs, careful with her words but clear in her message. This isn't about one person, she said. This is about a system that allowed conflicts of interest to flourish unchecked. We're following the evidence wherever it leads. Do you expect more hearings? Absolutely. What we showed in that hearing was the tip of an iceberg. The full scope of this, it's gonna shock people. Behind the scenes, investigators had obtained additional messages, not just from Leavitt's communications, but from others in the administration. A pattern was emerging. Multiple officials had been in contact with Musk's representatives during contract negotiations. Multiple promises had apparently been made. The board seat comment proved particularly damaging. Corporate governance experts explained that such an arrangement would constitute a clear violation of federal ethics laws. The promise of future employment in exchange for favorable government action was textbook corruption. Leavitt hired a new legal team, specialists in white-collar criminal defense. They immediately filed motions challenging the admissibility of the text messages, arguing they had been obtained through illegal surveillance. The motions were denied. The second hearing was scheduled for June. This time, the witness list included not just Leavitt, who was expected to invoke the Fifth again, but 3 other administration officials and 2 executives from Musk's companies. The night before the hearing, a bombshell dropped. One of the executives had decided to cooperate. In exchange for immunity, he would testify about the full extent of the coordination between Musk's companies and administration officials. His name was David Chen, a senior vice president at SpaceX who handled government relations. His testimony promised to provide the missing context for many of the text messages. When the hearing began, Chen sat at the witness table with his attorney beside him. The room was packed beyond capacity. Outside, protesters from both sides gathered, their chants audible through the thick walls. Mr. Chen, Crockett began, thank you for your cooperation. Can you describe your role in communications between SpaceX and the White House? Chen nodded nervously. I was the primary point of contact for government affairs. When issues came up with contracts or regulations, I would coordinate with various administration officials, including Ms. Leavitt. Yes, Ms. Leavitt was one of my regular contacts. Can you describe the nature of those communications? Chen took a deep breath. We would discuss upcoming contract decisions, media strategy, how to handle inquiries from journalists, Things that, in retrospect, probably crossed lines, such as Ms. Leavitt providing advance notice of contract approvals, such as coordinating responses to FOI requests, such as discussing how to prevent certain stories from being published. And the board seat? The reference in the text messages. Chen's voice dropped. That was real. Mr. Musk personally promised Ms. Leavitt a position on one of the company boards after she left government. It was understood to be compensation for her assistance. The murmuring in the room rose to a roar. The chairman called for order repeatedly. Did anyone else receive similar promises? I can't speak to specific arrangements, Chen said carefully. But I know there were discussions about future opportunities for several officials. Several, at least 4 that I'm aware of. The days following Chen's testimony were chaos. 2 of the officials he referenced resigned immediately. A third was placed on administrative leave. Leavitt, still on her leave of absence, issued a statement denying everything. But the denials rang hollow. Chen's testimony corroborated the text messages perfectly. Details matched. Timelines aligned. The coordination was undeniable. Federal prosecutors began presenting evidence to a grand jury. Legal experts predicted indictments within weeks. The question wasn't whether charges would come, but how many people would be charged. Musk's legal team shifted strategy, distancing him personally from the communications. They claimed that any promises made by his executives were unauthorized, that he had no knowledge of any corrupt arrangements. It was a convenient defense that satisfied no one. Crockett continued her work methodically. Additional documents surfaced. More witnesses came forward. The investigation expanded to include other government contracts, other industries, other officials. What had started as one hearing about text messages had become the largest corruption scandal in a decade. 6 months after the initial hearing, the indictments came down. Karoline Leavitt was charged with conspiracy, wire fraud, and violations of federal conflict of interest laws. 3 other officials faced similar charges. 2 SpaceX executives were indicted for bribery. Musk himself was not charged, though prosecutors made clear the investigation remained ongoing. The trial wouldn't begin for another year, but the political damage was immediate and irreversible. The administration's credibility lay in ruins. Trust in government institutions, already fragile, cracked further. Crockett gave one final press conference after the indictments were announced. Today's charges represent accountability, she said. Not partisan revenge, not political theater. Accountability. When public servants trade their positions for personal gain, when billionaires use their wealth to corrupt our government, there must be consequences.
Do you feel vindicated?
Crockett paused. I feel sad, honestly. Sad that people who were entrusted with public service chose instead to serve themselves. Sad that we've lost so much faith in our institutions. But also hopeful that sunlight really is the best disinfectant. Hopeful that the truth can still matter. What about Ms. Leavitt's claims that the evidence was illegally obtained? Every court that's reviewed those claims has rejected them. The evidence was obtained legally, through proper oversight channels. Ms. Leavitt's accusations were attempts to distract from her own conduct. The cameras had long since stopped rolling. The hearing room where everything began was empty now. Chairs neatly arranged, microphones silent. But somewhere in federal court buildings and corporate boardrooms, the consequences continued to unfold. The text messages that seemed so casual when they were written, the breezy coordination, the promises exchanged like friendly wagers, had become evidence of something much darker. Leavitt's legal team continued to fight, filing motion after motion, seeking any avenue to avoid trial. The defense strategy evolved from denial to deflection, to desperate claims of political persecution. Chen, the cooperating witness, entered witness protection. His testimony had made him a pariah in certain circles, a hero in others. He would live with the consequences of his choice for the rest of his life. And Crockett returned to her regular work, taking on new investigations, asking new questions. The system she had exposed was damaged, but not destroyed. New scandals would emerge, new officials would face temptation, but for one moment, in one hearing room, the truth had prevailed. The private texts that were never meant to be seen had been read aloud for the world to hear. The eruption of anger, the exposure of corruption, the moment when power finally faced accountability, all of it was now part of the public record. History would judge the significance. But for now, the evidence spoke for itself. We did it. Those 3 words, sent in a moment of celebration, had become an epitaph for careers built on corruption. The partnership they described was shattered. The promises they represented would go unfulfilled. And somewhere in the digital archives where such things are preserved, the messages remained. A permanent reminder that in the age of instant communication, nothing ever truly disappears. The story was far from over, but the first chapter had been written in a congressional hearing room, when a congresswoman held up a piece of paper and asked a simple question: "Did you send that message?" The answer, in the end, didn't matter. The evidence did. 9 months later, the federal courthouse in Washington became the center of the nation's attention. Leavitt arrived in a black SUV, surrounded by attorneys and security. Protesters lined both sides of the entrance, their signs waving in the cold morning air. Inside, the prosecution laid out their case methodically. The text messages were projected on screens for the jury to see. Each one was dissected, contextualized, connected to specific government actions. The lead prosecutor, a veteran of corruption cases, opened with a simple statement: "This case is about betrayal. Betrayal of public trust. Betrayal of the oath every government official takes." The defendant didn't just break rules. She sold her position to the highest bidder. Leavitt sat motionless at the defense table. Her attorneys had coached her on showing no emotion, no reaction. But when her own words appeared on the screen, "Board seat will be waiting," her jaw tightened visibly. The jury watched everything. After 3 weeks of testimony and 4 days of deliberation, the jury returned. The courtroom was silent as the foreperson stood. "On the count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, we find the defendant guilty." Leavitt's hand gripped the table edge. "On the count of federal conflict of interest violations, we find the defendant guilty." Her attorney placed a hand on her shoulder. "On the count of obstruction of congressional proceedings, we find the defendant guilty." The word echoed 3 times. Guilty. Guilty. Leavitt's composure finally broke. Tears streamed down her face as marshals approached. Her attorneys requested she remain free pending sentencing. The judge denied the motion. Outside, Crockett stood before microphones one last time. "Today, accountability won. No one is above the law. Not the powerful, not the connected, not those who believe their private messages would stay private forever." She paused. "Let this be a warning to anyone who thinks they can trade public service for personal profit. We will find out. We will expose it. And justice will follow." The cameras captured everything. The story that began with leaked texts had reached its conclusion. But the deeper lesson remained. In the digital age, secrets are fragile things, and power without accountability eventually destroys itself.